see more commemoration on 9th of May. Officially in Latvia, there is just one, it's 8th of May, which is, I think it's something like a commemoration of the victims of World War of Nazi and victory. It's like this, integrated, syncretic approach, commemorating and celebrating. But at least if you look at the level of public opinion, there is very high tolerance between these ethno-linguistic groups towards 9th of May and 8th of May. I mean, it's not like a conflicting way of dealing with these dates. It's very important to stress that there's even very low potential of the conflict. There have been rarely some conflicts during the 9th of May when 20,000 people are actually getting together at the monument of I don't know, liberators, how it's called in Riga.
I would say Soviet soldiers.
Yeah, Soviet soldiers, yeah. Colloquially known as a monument of liberators. So, I mean, it's very important not to juxtapose it artificially. It's very much, of course, juxtaposed on the political level, but on societal level, it's a bit different story.
Well, I would probably add that I don't really agree with you here. I would not be too optimistic on this issue. I think it's not the level of tolerance. I think it is rather the indifference towards the mnemonic heritage of the other group, because there is also, statistics show, quite low level of proficiency or competence about the legal status of some minority groups. I'm now talking about the non-citizens, not because I'm trying to somehow victimize them, but because the experience of the last 25 years is very much unknown to many young people who belong to mainly Latvian ethnic group and who are citizens. So it means that the experience of this transformation period has somehow escaped the competence of the probably major part of the young society in Latvia. And as I'm also working with some students, we sometimes try to open up these issues, and I just try to ask them, do they know what it means to be a non-citizen, or what kind of passport they have, and they actually show that they are quite, they are not experienced in this field. They don't really have, let's say, had debates on this issue, but non-citizens is just one issue, because non-citizens also are, I think, a legacy of traumatic experience of Latvia, not only politically, but the wider groups of society. I think what we are heading towards is the kind of politics of ignoring the traumatic experience of the other, because what is traumatic to your own group can probably exist in some other interpretations in other memory groups. And for example, I think if we try to work on the dialogue, and if we accept that dialogue can also become the basis for common memories, then we have to include the unpleasant, unnecessary, unneeded, and unknown memories of different other groups. And this also includes not only minorities now and here, but also the situation during the occupation, and also trying to open up also the issues of not being only victims but also perpetrators, because this is another way how you can block the debates about your own unpleasant memories. And this concerns also, for example, the destiny of a Jewish community in Latvia, and the ways and different scenarios of who saved Jews, who participated in their extermination in the camps, and how do we deal with elements of history which say that the community, which is defined as a victim, can also have people, facts, figures, and events which show that perpetration is also part of this identity and historical legacy. And this is where we just don't have enough public space. So I think Habermas would be quite disappointed if he would visit Latvia and see that we don't really debate, because as I think he stated that, or was it Bauman, I don't remember, that supermarket is not the space for political debates, and we don't really have many other public spaces to debate about history, and the substitution for debates is these commemoration acts, which are kind of political protests, or let's say protests against the way how others ignore your memories. And this again happens on both sides. So I would really say Riga, as a small capital, has a very tense and very small space for memories and tensions out there, and unfortunately politically it doesn't do enough to support the space for debating. This is where we are. We just keep silent about our memories. We actually heading towards history as fantasy, history as literary compensations for your political not participation or for other deficits of politics, and this is how we create this political simulacrum.
Interestingly, at the same time, especially in Lithuania, I also noticed that there is a lot of reconciliation between different ideological Lithuanian intellectual groups. Like before 2014 annexation of Crimea, before Euromaidan, but especially before 2014 Crimea's annexation, before that Lithuanian intellectual groups were really feeling tensions, fighting in mass media, fighting in conferences. I'll give some examples. There was quite a clear-cut division between Lithuanian liberal intellectuals and Lithuanian nationalistically oriented intellectuals as well as politicians. For instance, Lithuanian nationalist intellectuals like Ozolas, Landsbergis, they would emphasize that Lithuanians are in the past were the victims of Stalin's regime because of deportations to Siberia. They showed insensitivity towards Holocaust in Kaunas and Vilnius ghetto. On the other hand, liberal intellectuals like Donskis, Renslova, they did more than the entire Lithuanian political group on the revival of Holocaust memory. They organized many conferences emphasizing that look at the documents, look what happened in Kaunas and Vilnius. So they resurrected the Holocaust. And then the division went further on. Nationalistically oriented Lithuanian intellectuals criticized EU project and envisioned the future EU as the EU of states, of national states. And the danger they saw that statehood could be erased. Whereas liberal intellectuals, Lithuanian liberal intellectuals emphasized the need for multicultural Lithuanian state. And for the future of European Union as federation, because there is no need to cling to your ethnically based statehood. And after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, I no longer see it in Lithuania, and I wonder how it is in Latvia. I no longer see this tension between liberals and nationalists, because all of them talk about the danger of Russia and the danger to the Lithuanian state. And then to my question then is, did Lithuania, these completely opposite groups, suddenly made a consensus why Lithuania has to be defended by NATO? Because maybe there's no need. If there's no need to have the state on the basis of ethnicity, why do liberals and nationalists agree that the state has to be so protected? And I wonder if in Latvia and Estonia there's this danger of Russia somehow made some reconciliations. I also noticed that the same tendency in Poland, before Euromaidan, Lech Walesa and other Michnik were on the completely opposite sides. And now both of them speak about the danger of Russia, and both of them criticize Putin.
Just first of all, I would like to react about a little bit to change your topic into the topic of discussion between Hein and Abel. You know, who's right from them. And in Lithuanian case, there is always a discussion that about traitors. You know, that one group is 5 column, and another probably is right. And because the positions always change in 20th century many times, and the role of Cain and Abel as well was changed many times. But this topic to discuss one, which is who are traitors, still exists until now. This topic is very dangerous, and because nobody would like to be involved into the traitors group, and because it's public opinion. It's public opinion. This is very strong. And if you are traitor, just you probably will lost all your symbolical capital in Lithuania for some time, but after some period, everything could be changed. And actually, I don't think that some pause of discussion, some silence, silence period in discussions means something very important. It's just silence of about this one discussion, because sometimes some groups don't know what to do. What it's very interesting happened with, for example, that Ukrainian war and Maidan, that ultra-rightists in Lithuania started to vote against Ukraine and started even to support Russia, because according to them that Ukrainian plays this role of pro-American and pro-European, and that they choose not the right position, that they were under propaganda influence of Western countries. And you know that this situation of Cain and Abel is always under changing, that you are looking that left liberals will start to criticize, I would say, normal conservators, but the discussion originated completely in another place between right and ultra-right wing. And ultra-right wing started to speak differently than right wing. And there is actually a ultra-left wing in Lithuania, so all countries, but ultra-left wing is, you know, that they very fear everything, because they on the control of security all time. In Lithuania, just they be always in silence, just speaks only about the trade unionist movement, more or less, not about Ukraine. And ultra-rightists who would like to even sacrifice themselves for Lithuanian independence, they start to criticize this Ukraine policy. And that was very strange for many critiques, because everybody looks in Lithuania that threat should come from left position, that leftists should be the hand of Moscow. But they didn't look that ultra-rightists will organize meetings in Lithuania in order to separate Lithuania from EU. Actually, it's a very small group, non-influential, I would say, but with a very good internet web page.
I don't know, I have a suggestion, instead of the coffee break, to take the questions and to have a discussion right now, and then coffee break. But if you think that coffee break is necessary, I just don't want to lose the moment. If you have questions, and we could go on for another half an hour, and then coffee break, and then to the museum. Yes? Yeah, so please, yeah.
Well, just, well, as we know, the war speaks a very simplistic language. You are either for or against, and I think this, the culture of for or against is coming back to European political space, and this is really a pity. And actually, what I'm scrutinizing now since spring last year, I think the conservative parties have become active also in connection with different NGOs and institutes for academic analysis, which are always in need of financial resources in Latvia, because we mainly have the internal support for scientific institutions comes from the state, we are still not pluralistic in this field, but I have seen that many nationalistic deputies of the parliament, ISTME, they're willing to support debates of political topics last year and this year concerning the insecurity in Europe, and this insecurity has been presented as the weakness of European political culture, as weakness of let's say impotence of European culture to produce strong answers against the threat from Russia, and using this there have been also some debates on traditional values like society which is understood in terms of a strong family, and if you have a family then you have a kind of hierarchy and also domination, and family means also the community of those who all agree and those who disagree do not really belong to the family. So this language has traditionally been used by the conservatives, but now it has become publicly more attractive and is also supported because of the lack of alternative financial supports from different academia people. And I think these family values are somehow very close to the rhetorics of Putin's internal politics, where political diversity and also gender politics are suppressed, and there you have the idea of a strong masculine society, a society which is also homophobic, which is also racistic, and which is intolerant. So it is actually the irony of this tension that democracies in Europe, in different countries, begin to learn the language of Putin's political culture, and we very easily, we don't really notice it, but we start to use the same ideas of community which is mobilized by the conflict, and if you are mobilized then you leave outside your intellectual field all doubts and alternatives and pluralism, and I think this is actually the largest threat from this tension and conflict in Ukraine, that this conflict has an impact on the overall democracy and pluralism in Europe, so that it is very easy for conservatives and radicals from different sides to use this language of one correct opinion, one strong community, which doesn't really reflect about alternatives.
So perhaps the audience will has questions, comments. Yes,
yeah.
Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for putting together this very interesting panel. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. I would like to question the usefulness of geopolitics as an analytical framework in memory studies, and I would like to bring in the issue of the simulacra, which was mentioned by Deniss, and maybe suggesting that to be used in the context how Borges is using in his famous short story about how the empire becomes something which it never has been, to a map. Because I was somehow shocked by this discourse which was present in this panel related to the geopolitics and the destiny and culture as an explanatory framework. So I would like to address the panelists to this very complicated question, namely that if you are moving out from the geopolitical framework to the now kind of post-colonial framework, what actually Gintautas was somehow using. And then moving the problem into the center of the empire, which is Moscow, in your interpretation. Aren't we actually coming to the same conclusion all the time, and coming back and harking back the same type of conclusions and issues all the time? However, if we are using the concept of the simulacra, there is a potential of resistance there. And there is a potential of somehow subverting and rethinking the kind of empire-centered imagination, which we are actually talking about now, from a kind of protest and a kind of innovative way. So I was just wondering if the three distinguished panelists can think about the politics of memory as a form of resistance and as a form of fighting against this empire-centered imagination which is very much lurking around in this room, based on the concept of simulacra. I know it's difficult, but maybe we should, try to think towards this direction, because somehow these arguments and these concepts are somehow creating a self-prophecy all the time. And I'm just wondering if you have got any comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you for question. I couldn't answer for all of it. Maybe my partners, colleagues will add or to say something different. But I would say that you're right. My approach is a little bit different to geopolitical question, because ordinary geopolitics try to consider it itself without the conflict with history. On my opinion, that this conflict with a history, it's urgently important in the states, which could be considered under the example of post-colonial studies. I'm not fan of post-colonial studies because many of post-colonial studies use this essentialistic approach that we need to reduce all new inventions like Soviet inventions or Russian Empire inventions or just some Western or American inventions, and to rebuild something essential. On my opinion, it's completely utopia and just even dangerous myth in some case. But post-colonial studies has as well some very good examples, critique of different hegemonies and hegemonic narratives, and even post-colonial study shows how history built these hegemonic approaches and even built simulacrum identities, and these simulacrum identities are manufactured in contemporary society and even sell in the different supermarkets. So I'm not agree with Zygmunt Bauman, who say that that is political, that supermarket is not the public place for political debates. I would say that all contemporary supermarkets all time participate in political debates. They just sell these products of political debates, and many of historians would like to be involved into a global supermarket, and they produce and reproduce marketable historical images. And if post-colonial images are marketable, they produced and them. So this discussion start to be dangerous in, I would say, in such countries like Blue Land, but that what I see here optimistic that our governments partly understand it and start to control this market of historical images, start to control this market on some politics, I would say in Lithuania, like ceasefire, no reconciliation, no debates, just ceasefire. The one side stop and the another speaks.
About geopolitics and about the analytical value of geopolitics, I think it's very high actually. It's very high analytical value if you combine it with the right concepts. For example, with the concept of ontological security, which is in our international relations one important concept in terms of states trying to maintain an ontological security through historical narratives, presenting them on international stage. And it has been part and parcel of Russia's strategy of public diplomacy since Putin's first presidency to impose, and it is explicitly declared on their foreign policy concepts, on their different strategies of public diplomacy, that history, along with mass media, is very important instrument, a very important tool, how you can maintain your positions in the post-Soviet area, first of all. Post-Soviet area is very important, of course, in Russian strategy, including Baltic states sometimes. It varies. Sometimes it is included in their strategy, sometimes it's not. Dugin, the ideologist, if you know, he's the author of Russian World, of this concept, Russian World. He is saying that sometimes Baltic states are not part of Russian world, but sometimes you can see that it somehow becomes part of Russian world in practice. But so coming back to geopolitics as analytical category, of course I would say that we have to look at particular contexts when you try to apply it. But speaking about the post-Soviet or post-communist area, especially about the countries where there is a large Russian-speaking community, not so many actually, where Russia is a third party always. It's very important. History becomes a very important tool of working with that minority in a particular country. So, but analytically, you of course have to look how sometimes these geopolitical imperatives, if not changed, then how they are used, how they are integrated in the larger scene of activities of of Russia. I'm not speaking about this particular context of Russia. We could definitely, I think, apply also it to the United States in terms of dealing with some historical issues. Of Japanese, internees, yes, and all these things. I think it is always about geopolitics also, and relations, bilateral as well as international relations in general. So geopolitics, of course, it's very loaded, politicized concept, I agree, and very media-like this concept, media-like, mass media-like this concept, of course, and therefore it's a bit trivialized. But on the other hand, okay, I have seen those volumes which deal not so much with geopolitics in terms of memory studies, but with foreign policy and history and representation of past as part and parcel of your foreign policy strategy. I agree that's maybe less loaded concept, foreign policy, but I don't think that it's empty, analytically useless to use geopolitics.
I would just add that historic or memory discourses, they materialize into concrete geopolitical situation. If May 9th had been all this has been since 1889 interpreted as liberation only, and the Soviet Union as the winner of the World War II, if we had been promoting this kind of discourse since 1989, I think geopolitical situation would have been different today. It would have been simply Russian-friendly.
Well, I would also like to comment to the comments of the colleague concerning the simulacrum. I was using this term as, let's say, a sign which signifies nothing, behind which is emptiness. Emptiness of meaning, because in this case the parliament of non-citizens is on the one hand a very disturbing sign of people who create alternative space for belonging and participation. On the other hand, these people vote for nothing, because this parliament has no judicial power, no competences to change any or to solve any problems of this community. On the other hand, also emptiness can become, let's say, a part of this geopolitical culture, because these people signify that they remain non-citizens. This is not a parliament of future citizens, it is not a school for, or let's say teaching courses for people who would like to become citizens. Although state and also Riga municipality do support different courses for people who would like to become citizens. So this is not that there are barriers to become citizens, but there are many symbolical barriers to becoming part of a political community until it remains the mainly political and ethnic community. We still are struggling for creating, I think, a political community which is, again, quoting Habermas, which is wider and larger than the community of ethnic culture. And what is happening is that minorities are now trying to copy the conservative discourses of some politics or politicians of majorities, and they try to create communities which are based on the emotional memories, on remembering the glorious